Think of Lotus's Europa as an Elise for grown-ups, and you won't be too far off the mark. Here's a sports car that's every bit as focused as you'd expect a Lotus to be, but which manages to be a useful dash more usable as a coupe you could enjoy every day. Very rare, it's an acquired but rather unique taste. Back in the 1960s, British sports car makers Lotus built their first mid-engine model. It was called the Europa. Fast forward nearly half a century and the Norfolk sports car maker again builds a groundbreaking, relatively affordable car. And it too wears the Europa badge. Now it's groundbreaking for them in that it's a car that you don't necessarily have to be a hardcore enthusiast to own. With this car, the Hethel engineers had a pretty straightforward brief. Take the basic premise behind the Elise and make it more accessible. Give people who aren't double jointed the opportunity to get in and out, give it a proper roof and a modicum of luggage space, and keep the rest of the Elise's good bits. Then market it at a price that might make potential customers of performance coupes like Audi's TT and Nissan 370Z think twice. Viewing the Europa as a slightly more refined Elise or Exige model is pretty much a non-starter. It has a unique chassis number, Type 121, and doesn't even share the same engine, substituting its stablemate's multi-valve Toyota unit for a turbocharged 2-litre Vauxhall power plant, the engine that was used in the Lotus-built Vauxhall VX220. Now, this engine comes in two states of tune, the 197 bhp S or the 222 bhp SE that I'm driving here. Both are capable of getting from rest to 60 in under 6 seconds on the way to a top speed of around 145 miles an hour. The engine isn't quite as charismatic as that in the Elise, nor is the power quite as accessible when you want it. On the other hand, it's more refined and a hugely impressive mid-range punch, especially in the 222 brake horsepower SE version that I'm driving here, that makes 60 from rest a second quicker. 90% of this engine's pulling power is available from just 2,000 RPM. It's that flexible. That means that you have an affordable Lotus that's much easier to live with day in, day out than you'd expect a car of this kind to be. Okay, so it isn't a GT coupe that you can switch off in like some rivals. But to be honest, no Lotus should ever be like that anyway. This car is so light, it has no need of power steering, so you can feel every camber change, every patch of tarmac. There's amazing reserves of grip, and the car feels so eminently chuckable, mainly because at under 1,000 kilograms in weight, it's 50% lighter than other rivals, say lighter than a Nissan 370Z, and that's the difference you can feel in the first 100 yards of driving the thing. Drive it hard and you realise that the 6-speed manual gearbox is brilliantly positive and the ABS brakes are superb. Overall, it harks back to the way that sports cars used to be. If you love driving, you'll love it. Before the Europa, if you wanted an affordable Lotus, an Elise in other words, you needed to be in pretty good physical shape, if only for the gymnastic suppleness needed to clamber over the high sill and get in or out of the thing with the roof on. Now, though the Europa is just 3mm taller than the Elise, by reshaping the sill and extending the doors, there's a 55mm greater aperture through which to clamber. So it's an improvement, even if it is still difficult to enter and exit gracefully. Still, once inside, there's plenty of room for a 6-foot-plus driver. Stylist Russell Carr has created a shape that suggests the Europa to be much bigger than its Lotus stablemates, even though it's actually only 4 inches longer. Though the aluminium tub, double wishbone suspension and mid-engined rear-wheel drive layout, they're all hallmarks of the Norfolk marque, this car is unique in its longer wheelbase, which makes possible that slightly more accessible cabin and the extra boot space, although at 42 litres, it's still not that huge. Following a price realignment, you might be surprised to learn that you'll pay around the same, around £28,000 to £33,000 for a Europa as you will for an up-spec Elise. That means the car slots in just below the entry-level starting point for the more track-focused Exige range. And it also means that you'll pay the same kind of money as you will for equivalently powerful versions of rivals like Audi's TT or Nissan's 370Z. There are two versions, the 197 brake horsepower S and this 222 brake horsepower SE model. Now, despite the marketing strapline, business class by Lotus, it's unlikely that either will enjoy many corporate sales. Company car users would probably want a few more toys in here, although the optional leather trim package that I've got on this particular car does give it a very upmarket feel. Standard equipment includes all the basics that you would expect, like air conditioning, electric windows, an alarm, and a gorgeous set of alloy wheels. With its lightweight body and respectable aerodynamics, the Europa will go far further on a gallon of fuel than any of its equivalently powerful rivals. Now, you should manage around 30 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and manage 220 grams per kilometre of CO2 as an environmental showing. And that's not bad in terms of a return for a 150 mile an hour sports car. Lotus residual values are traditionally strong, with Elise and Exige models holding on to around 50% of their value after 3 years. Now, I wouldn't expect the Europa to replicate that, but now that prices have been realigned, it should hang on to its value more tenaciously. Insurance groupings are, well, Group 20. To want a Europa, you've still got to want a Lotus, with all the joys and trials that entails. This car isn't big enough of a departure from an Elise or an Exige to change that. But if you've yearned for a Lotus that doesn't necessarily have to stay garaged up for 5 days out of 7, then this car could be exactly what you're looking for. It's more affordably priced than once it was, a change which may have come too late to make this car the sales success its makers originally hoped it would be. But if a drive in a £30,000 performance coupe leaves you a bit cold, but you're not yet ready for a hardcore sports car, then the Europa could be the Lotus you've never heard of, with everything you want.